All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about Scrum today, but maybe not the version you read about in the books. Nope, we are going on a hunt for those sneaky, hidden saboteurs that can turn a brilliant framework into, well, a total drag.
You know that feeling, right? You're on a team, you're doing all the Scrum stuff, you've got the meetings, the roles, the fancy boards, but it just feels heavy. Kind of like you're just going through the motions. And that spark, that burst of innovation and real value, it's just not there. Well, if that sounds familiar, you are absolutely in the right place.
So here's the good news. The problem? It's probably not Scrum. The real culprits are these sneaky, kind of counterintuitive behaviors we call antipatterns. Think of them as the secret villains of the story, undermining your team's success right from the inside.
So what is an anti-pattern, really? Well, it's a practice that, on the surface, looks like a good idea. It seems useful. But secretly, it's actually doing damage. Here's a perfect example. A team decides to make their daily Scrum 30 minutes long so they can be extra thorough. Sounds responsible, right? But what they've actually done is kill the whole point of a quick, focused planning session. That, my friends, is a classic anti-pattern.
And this is where it gets really interesting. See, there's a huge difference here. Breaking a rule? That's obvious. You skip sprint planning? Everybody notices. But undermining a value? Now that's way more subtle and honestly, way more damaging. Like turning the daily Scrum into a status report for a manager. It looks like you're communicating, but what you're really doing is killing the team's ability to self-manage and plan for themselves.
Okay, so how do we get good at spotting these things? Well, we're going to need a field guide. We're going to break down all these Scrum traps into 4 main categories. Think of it as your guide to spotting them out in the wild. So, here's the game plan. First, we'll look at the team itself. Then, we'll dive into the Scrum events, the meetings. After that, we'll check out the backlog and how work gets delivered. And finally, we'll tackle the big one, those tricky problems that come from the wider organization.
All right, first up, team anti-patterns. We're starting with the core unit, the Scrum team, because this is often where the friction really begins, right inside the roles themselves.
Let's talk about the product owner. A classic anti-pattern is when the PO acts like a requirements boss, just handing down orders. That totally kills collaboration. Or what about the PO who's always changing the sprint scope halfway through? That just destroys the team's focus. And maybe the worst one, a PO who doesn't have the authority to actually make a decision. That just leads to endless delays and a super frustrated team.
So what's the end result of all this? Well, it's exactly what you'd expect. Priorities are a mess, work gets thrown away, and your team is just completely frustrated and demotivated. It's a fast track to dysfunction.
Okay, now for the Scrum Master. This is a huge one of the most common traps out there. Instead of being a coach, someone who's there to help the team grow and manage themselves, the Scrum Master starts acting like a traditional project manager, assigning tasks, controlling everything. It is the exact opposite of what the role is supposed to be.
And let's be crystal clear about the impact here. When this happens, you're not really doing Scrum anymore. You're doing fake Scrum. The team never grows, they never learn to solve their own problems, and that whole core idea of empiricism, learning from experience, it's just gone.
Okay, so we've seen how the roles can get twisted. Let's move on to category 2, the events. I'm talking about the meetings themselves. These are supposed to be moments for a team to get in sync, but man, they can turn into massive roadblocks.
I bet you're going to recognize some of these. First, the daily Scrum, that's just a status meeting for a manager. Huge one. Or how about sprint planning? That's a total mess because the backlog is a disaster. And my personal favorite, the sprint review, where instead of showing a working product, you get a PowerPoint. It's just no. The whole point is to get real feedback on real work from the people who matter.
All right, category 3. We're looking at the backlog and delivery now. Think of these as the hidden cracks in the foundation. You might not see them at first, but they can make the whole house crumble.
Let's see if any of these sound familiar. Your product backlog has become a giant dumping ground with thousands of items. Or your definition of done is super weak, or worse, just totally ignored. That means you're just piling up technical debt. And then there's the mini waterfall trap, where the team is busy for weeks, but nobody sees a single usable thing until the very, very end.
And that brings us to our final category. This one is often the toughest nut to crack: organizational anti-patterns. This is when the problem isn't the team, It's the whole system around them that's fighting against being agile.
And this is the core conflict right here. The company talks the talk. They use all the agile words, sprints, velocity, stand-ups, but the way they think is still old-school waterfall. It's all command and control. Managers are still assigning tasks, demanding reports, and it just completely undermines the whole point.
So we've just walked through this minefield of potential traps. So what's the big takeaway? It's actually pretty simple, but really powerful. Just being able to recognize these things, to put a name to them and call them out, that is the single most important first step. And trust me, this isn't just about helping your team. It's a career superpower.
Which brings us to the ultimate tool. Look, knowing this stuff isn't just for fixing your team's process. It's an incredible tool for your career. Why? Because interviewers love asking about anti-patterns. It's the question that separates the people who've just read the book from the people who actually get it.
So you're in the interview. The question comes, so tell me about Scrum anti-patterns. How do you absolutely nail that answer? Don't worry, we're going to walk through the perfect response step by step.
All right, here we go. Part 1. You start with a really sharp, confident definition. You show them you get that these aren't just one-off mistakes. They are recurring, harmful behaviors that get in the way of Scrum's core purpose. And then, bam, you immediately give them a structure. You tell them you break them down into those 4 categories: team, event, backlog, and organizational. Right away, you sound organized and clear.
Next up, part 2. You give them specific examples, and you pull them from different categories to show your range. You mention something like the product owner acting as a requirements boss, and then the organization pressuring teams with velocity targets. See? You're showing you understand the problem at the team and the organizational level. And the key thing is you explain why it's bad. You say, these things reduce transparency and break self-management.
And then you bring it home with a powerful, proactive closing. You're not just a problem spotter, you're a problem solver. You frame the Scrum Master's role as the person who helps the team recognize and eliminate these patterns. You're there to restore true agility. That is the answer that gets you hired.
So look, whether you're prepping for that next big interview or you're just trying to make your next sprint a little bit better, it all boils down to this: awareness. And that leads me to my final question for you. When you go back to your team, really think about it. Which one of these anti-patterns, which hidden saboteur is slowing your team down right now? Because just being able to see it, well, that's the first and most important step to making things better.